Imagine moving into a new apartment, hoping for peace and safety, only to find yourself trapped in a nightmare with your landlord. Today, in this courtroom, Ms. Fair stands against her former landlord, accusing him of wrongful eviction, harassment, and even destroying her furniture. But as the case unfolds, shocking details come to light. Was this landlord truly abusive? Or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Judge: Ms. Fair, the defendant is your former landlord? Ms. Fair: yes. Judge: and you're suing him for several things. First, wrongful eviction and the cost of relocating to a new apartment. Second, for damage he allegedly caused to your furniture. And third, you're suing for harassment? Ms. Fair: yes, harassment. Judge: okay. When did you move into his apartment, and how did you find it? Ms. Fair: I found it through a coworker. He told me a minister at his church had an apartment available. The neighborhood I was living in before was very dangerous, so I thought this was my chance for a better life. I met John, the landlord, and he said I could move in. I paid him, moved in, and at first everything seemed fine. What started as a simple rental agreement soon spiraled into chaos. Ms. Fair claims her landlord began crossing boundaries, showing up unannounced, intruding when she had guests, and even letting people into her home without her permission. Ms. Fair: I once came home to find a stranger inside my house. Later, I learned my landlord had let him in. He had no right to do that. Judge: we'll get to that. Continue. Ms. Fair: he also ruined my couch. I had stored it in his garage with his permission. He had the only key. One night, I actually saw him and some friends with a water hose. They sprayed my entire living room set. My couch, my table, everything was soaked. Judge: really? You saw this with your own eyes? Ms. Fair: yes, I did. The courtroom audience laughed in disbelief. But Ms. Fair stood firm. She even claimed to have a police report backing her story. Judge: that's interesting, because in your official court papers, you didn't mention that you personally witnessed him soaking your furniture. Why not? Ms. Fair: I did mention it in a police report. He also left threatening phone messages. I was terrified. Judge: what was the date you say you saw this happen? Ms. Fair: June 30th. June 30th, a date now burned into this case. The gavel struck, the room went silent. The question remained: was Ms. Fair a victim of a hostile landlord, or was her story too inconsistent to be trusted? Judge: that was before or after this incident with your ex-husband? Ms. Fair: this was after, about maybe 2.5 weeks later. Judge: and just to be clear, it wasn't your ex-husband? Ms. Fair: no, it was my daughter's father. Judge: I see. Sir, when did you serve her with an eviction notice? Landlord: I served her with a 3-day notice because her ex, or daughter's father, threatened me. I wanted him off the premises. Judge: what date? Landlord: the 13th. Judge: that's what I wanted to know. Thank you. The timeline was slowly taking shape, but now the attention shifted back to the central issue, the ruined furniture. Judge: now, sir, tell me about this furniture. Landlord: Your Honor, when she moved in, she already had furniture. It wasn't in good condition. Later, she received other furniture and asked if she could store the old pieces in my garage. I agreed, but only temporarily. I even warned her, I keep gas equipment in there. It's not safe to store couches for long. She promised it would only be a month. According to the landlord, the problem started with carelessness. He claimed the couch pillows had been left outside, collecting moisture for weeks. Landlord: I told her to get them moved. When nothing happened, I finally cleared the garage. I placed her couches in the backyard, next to where the pillows had been sitting. They're still there, untouched. Judge: disgusted you left all that furniture rotting in the backyard? What kind of apartment unit is this? Landlord: just a 2-unit property. It has a spacious backyard. Judge: and how long were those couches left out there? Landlord: maybe 2 months. Ms. Fair looked visibly upset, clutching photos and receipts in her hand, ready to prove her side of the story. Ms. Fair: Your Honor, I have pictures of my couch, along with the receipt. Judge: just a second. I believe the pillows were outside the whole time, and I believe him. Listen carefully. He was under no obligation to store your furniture. He did you a favor by letting you keep it there. You weren't paying for storage. You rented an apartment, not his garage. The courtroom grew tense. The judge's words were clear. Ms. Fair had little ground to stand on regarding the furniture claim. But the heart of the case wasn't over. The real question was harassment. Judge, now, I've seen the letters you sent him. They suggest you were looking for relocation money. That's what they say. But let's move on. I want you to tell me exactly what you mean by harassment. Ms. Fair, I have phone harassment letters. He kept calling me, demanding that I move. We used to be friends, but everything changed after the argument involving my daughter's father. Judge, phone harassment? Be specific. Ms. Fair, he told me he was going to throw me and my daughter out. He came to my house at 10:30 at night, demanding rent money days before it was even due. He said if I didn't pay, he would find another way to get me out. According to Ms. Fair, the landlord's calls weren't just about rent. They were personal, aggressive, and relentless. She described a man who crossed every line of professionalism. Ms. Fair, he said if I didn't have the money, then he could demand something else. And if I refused, he'd make sure to throw me out. The words hung heavy in the courtroom. Harassment or simple landlord pressure. That would soon be for the judge to decide. Ms. Fair, he kept calling the phone 6 to 7 times between the 13th and the 17th, demanding that I move. It was a nightmare. Even my children and my niece were harassed when they went outside to throw out the trash. Judge Judy, just a second. Hold on. He told you he wanted you to move on the 13th. Is that right? Ms. Fair, yes. With the date locked in, the judge turned to the landlord, now referred to as Mr. Gonzalez, for his side of the story. Judge Judy, Mr. Gonzalez, she moved in during March. In March, April, and May, did you have any problems with her? Landlord, she was always late with the rent, but I understood her situation. Her daughter had been through a traumatic incident, and I tried to be compassionate. Other than that, no. She was a decent tenant. Judge Judy, so no real problems other than late rent? Landlord, correct. For 3 months, everything seemed tolerable. But then June arrived, and with it, a storm of conflict. Landlord, in June, her daughter's father came to stay. At first, he seemed fine. But on June 12th, there was a major altercation. He got into a physical fight with the child herself. Things were breaking, chaos inside the apartment. I couldn't ignore it. The courtroom went silent. A child caught in the middle of domestic tension. That was something no one expected to hear. Judge Judy, who exactly got into an argument? Ms. Fair, angrily my daughter, she's 6 years old. The landlord continued, describing how he tried to calm things down, mindful that his own daughter had to wake up early for school. But the late-night shouting and cursing only grew louder. Landlord, at 2 in the morning, she was yelling on the phone. I banged on the wall to quiet things down, but it didn't stop. Finally, I went over to ask if I could speak with her. Her daughter's father threatened me directly. I chose to walk away. I didn't want things to get violent. According to Mr. Gonzalez, he wasn't throwing her out at that moment. He just wanted to resolve what he called a nuisance. But Ms. Fair saw things very differently. Ms. Fair, that's a lie. He told me I had better talk to him immediately or I'd have problems. I told him I was busy cooking for the church fundraiser and would speak later, but he demanded I come right away. Judge Judy, Ms. Fair, listen carefully. You had no issues with him in March, April, or May. He didn't serve you an eviction notice during that time. This problem began when your daughter's father stayed with you, correct? Ms. Fair, interrupting no, because I also argued with my sister once, and Judge Judy, cutting her off, stop. Answer the question. The judge pressed harder, demanding specifics. Harassment in March? Nothing. Harassment in April? None. Even in May? Nothing. It all came back to June, the month when tempers boiled over, arguments erupted, and threats were exchanged. Judge Judy, what happened in June. When he tried to talk to you, you brushed him off. That's when everything started. Gavel bangs, dramatic music swells. The judge's patience was running thin. With timelines and testimonies now colliding, the truth of this landlord-tenant war was coming into sharp focus. But the bigger question remained, Was this harassment or just the fallout of a troubled household? The answer would soon decide everything.